Hey everyone, welcome back to Creative Survival. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We're excited to have you here. This is the channel where we just kind of dive into creativity. We go through other people's journeys and just kind of learn from the places they've been. So hopefully we can all grow together in this messy creative life that we all kind of walk through. On today's episode, we have founder and creative visionary of Drawer Full of Giants. We have Tania. Tania, welcome to Creative Survival. We're so glad to have you here.
Oh, it's a real honor to be here. Thank you for asking me.
So, for our audience, just kind of give us a little background on Drawer Full of Giants and kind of what you do in the creative space.
Sure. Well, I personalize business with illustration, and I have a graphic design background for about 20 plus years. And now my bread and butter is total, yeah, I specialize in illustration for businesses.
That's awesome because it's all about, everyone says, always find your niche, right?
Yes, yes, exactly.
So, I'm curious, jumping way back, how did you start, I don't know, kind of venturing into creativity, especially as a way of living, reaching kind of like where you are now?
So I chose my career when I was 12 years old, wanted to be a commercial artist after meeting um, a commercial artist, and he showing me around his work studio with my parents' invitation. And as I got older, I really focused hard through high school with technical drawing class and art class. And my goal was to go to art school. But I ended up dropping out of high school at 16. And therefore, my artwork was not of a standard to reach sort of the university level. And but I got a job right out of high school in an art studio. So I was a junior, way before the computer world. So when they talked about getting a new page up and uh, getting it ready, that was a good, good 7 or 10 minutes, just getting the artboard out and lining it up with blue line and everything. And I had that job for about 18 months, and of course, being young and silly, I made some choices, and I ended up going into um, leaving that job and pursuing a sort of an overseas holiday for 4 years, and we called that the Big OE back in down in New Zealand and Australia, and so our big overseas experience. And so I come home and life had changed for me. I started working in the hospitality field. So in my later 20s, I got to know God for the very first time. And after becoming a Christian, having worked freelance and jobs that had sort of an aspect of creativity in them, I would be hired as a graphic designer with sort of office work as an attachment to it. I realized that there was a sense that came over me that the Lord put inside of me, that it was my moral responsibility to cultivate the natural gifts and talents inside of me. That led me to looking at going back into school. But I had other interests as well at the time, like being, I would say, a relatively new Christian. One of the very first things that I really felt really connected to was the desire and need to look at overseas missions as I felt a real calling in my heart, with no interest in what people were actually doing, which was bit of a strange aspect. And at the same time, the Lord saying, well, you need to go back to school. Now, I was 38 when an opportunity opened that I was made redundant from my job, and I'm thinking, well, it's going to be now or never. And I went into school, think very, very, yeah, fear and trepidation, because I'd left high school at 16 and I'd never written, you know, huge essays, and I had never sat huge exams, and I was thinking, oh, I couldn't learn, but I really excelled. And so I had 3 years. I just loved it passionately. I was an A student. The Lord really blessed me. I had a scholarship my first year. I was really supported by my family. So I had all this aspect of doing very well. In my last year, with the intention after 3 years of the reason why going into art school was because in my church there was an expectation, if you went overseas and did mission work, they really wanted you to have a higher education. So that was the baseline of why I did this. So with that baseline as it was, after 4 years, I kind of nearly forgot it. And I'm a single mum and I'm wanting a job now. I'm feeling like all the gaps in my learning had been filled in. I was doing really well. And then one afternoon, about 6 months from finishing my degree, it was like the Lord walked into the classroom, came over behind me, leant over my shoulder, and whispered into my ear, "I want you to work for yourself." And I just thought, no, no, please don't ask me. Please don't do that. But it was one of those things that it's God talking to you. It just hits the very marrow of your bone. You just think, far out, the Lord wants me to work for myself. And I'm just grappling with it. Within a few days, my tutors pulled me aside and both counseled me that they felt that I should work for myself. And I thought, oh, stars. So they affirmed me. I think it was such a big deal to think about working for yourself. And I have no experience. I have no one in my family that really, worked for themselves. So I have no experience. I have a couple of friends who were working for themselves in the secular world, and they seemed really sort of the alpha male. And so I'm like, so not my world, and I didn't know what to expect. But these two tutors totally affirmed my abilities. They said that I had what it took and I had the ability, creativity wise. I had a lot of different styles. I was fast, and I had all these aspects that I thought, okay, that gave me the boost to step out in faith, basically. So I said to the Lord, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And so I prepared and I made myself got myself a limited liability company, called myself Drawer Full of Giants, which was a 3-week process of coming up with a name. And then as soon as I left school, I started working for myself. And I say working, I just spent a lot of time on Facebook. And I have no idea what I'm doing because I know how to do art, but I don't know how to talk about my business. I don't know how to get clients. I hardly know how to charge. In fact, I know how to charge a little bit, but I don't really want to tell you too much because not you per se, but like people, my clients, because I was really embarrassed to ask for such and such money per hour. So it was very uncomfortable. But that was my the nucleus of Draw Full of Giants. Of course, it's coming up 9 years now. So 9 years ago this happened, but it seems so clear to me.
That's fantastic. I mean, the fact that it's almost been a decade already with such growth, because I think we definitely all struggle, especially starting out. You're like, oh, what do I charge? And if I say too
Uh,
much, they're gonna say no, and you like work out of that like kind of fear-based
Totally.
mentality.
And I didn't have any idea, I had no concept of target markets. I was I was like a graphic designer, but it was that first year after doing it. And you work for anybody and everybody. Can I have a business card? Yes. Yes, you can have a business card. I will design the heck out of that for you. Like it was just everybody I want to get money from everyone. And it was like a whole lot of years that go past that you learn like little bit by little bit. And, unless you have that training in the beginning, or I didn't know you could get a coach. I didn't know you could get a mentor. I didn't know. So I learned the hard way, but that's okay because it was just, and I had God. God was my, he told me what to do. And this was an interesting thing for me because at this point, I think I'd been a Christian for about 10 years. So, and I could see the steps in which the Lord had guided me to listen out for his voice. He taught me how to hear his voice. I'm reading the word, so I'm in the word every day. He was answering my prayers, and now he's thrown me into this world of business. So I only knew him on a personal, private, day-to-day basis. I had no idea that he was also the God of business, which was now I was now in a new space. So he was, for instance, he started he told me he wanted me to work for myself. And then in that first little while, he started giving me ideas for marketing to market myself. And I had it all written down. And I'm thinking, this is great, but I don't know if I was very sheepish because I thought, Lord, I think you've given me this information, and I'm like, I've got pages of it, but I don't know if, can I take it to a professional? Like I actually said that to the Lord of the universe who created everything. Can I take it to a professional? And I could almost see him smiling at me, going, "All right, then you can take it to a professional," because I had no idea that God could give me a transcript or a manifesto for how to run my business. And I remember taking it to someone in marketing, and I said to the Lord beforehand, okay, if she says this is good, then I know that I know that, you are amazing, like you are a marketer. And but if she says, well, you had an idea, but it didn't really work out, then I'll know that I'm not hearing. So I was testing. I didn't trust myself. Um, not really, but this was a totally new space for me. So anyway, I put it out before her, and she said, "Oh my Lord, this is amazing! I don't even get big businesses give me this much information, and this is perfect." And I just went, "Oh my Lord, you are." I was just like, I stopped listening to her because I was flabbergasted that the God of the universe would give me a marketing plan for my little piddly little business. And yeah, I was just in awe of him. And so he started moving me very quietly at that stage. And I am learning to trust him in this new world of, can I do business God's way? And even that term, can I do business God's way? It wasn't even in my vocabulary at that point. That was years later. But it was unique to hear his voice for my business. Mm.
Did you grow up in a like creative household? Are your parents creative?
Um, I remember finding, no. So I came across, I was rummaging through my mum's things along as a teenager, and I found some artwork of hers. And she was an incredible artist, and she had created these beautiful imagery when she was about 14. Both my parents were basically made to leave high school when they were 14 years old. Um, so they didn't have the opportunity. So yes, my mum's creative, but they never had a lifestyle or career in those. My dad, he's a bus driver, and he's a tram driver. So he was in the Air Force and as a truck driver. And my mum, factory. She's very good at creating, sewing, and so yeah, she's creative in that aspect. And she had jobs that would use that skill, but she they weren't allowed to. They were of the era where they must do other things. I'm of an era that I was very fortunate. They were very supportive of me. In fact, my dad would tell everybody of his little girl who could draw really well, and that's how I met the commercial artist when I was 12, because dad was on a photo shoot as the bus driver, and got talking to the commercial artist and said, "Oh, my girl, she can draw. Oh, bring her on over." So it was like that. They're very supportive, and he helped me get my first job, and yeah, it was great.
That's fantastic. That helps. That was actually my next question because I know a lot of people I've talked to, their parents don't fully understand or don't like. I remember like my dad was really big on get a job for the city. You gotta get
Yeah,
a job for the city. And I'm like, that sounds awful. Like that sounds
yeah,
like a death sentence. And that's not even viable anymore. but
yeah.
but like, when you're a little kid and that's all you're told, like get that steady job, go work for the city or the state. Uh, it
It's it's
doesn't.
it's it, yeah, it's interesting actually, because as a parent myself now, um, and I look at how my parents were with me, I think there's this aspect of, um, they don't know, like when you don't know a certain field, like they don't know how it could go because you have a limited knowledge. For instance, I'm creative. Now my father's always asking, have you got a client? Are you getting paid? So he still has that, you doing how are you doing what you're doing? My daughter, on the other hand, her creativity, she's a musician. Like she sings, she's in musical theatre, a bit of opera. She's toured Australia for 18 months with a band. And it's like, and at the moment she's in finishing up her second year. Like she's 26 and she's finishing up her second year of her part of her music degree. So in that, I know we've had conversations as a family. I wonder where this will go. Now I have a limited knowledge of the music world, and so there's like one or two things, like if it's not like X Factor, what is it? Like, are you going to be a musician singing on stage for everybody? Are you going to work on Broadway? As I had basically gone through college myself 10 years ago, I knew for myself that result when you start school, you don't necessarily leave with thinking with the same sort of thoughts. So I knew that I had, halfway through my final year, that's when I had the inspiration to go forward. So I trust it'll be the same for her. She will, I've said, just enjoy everything, see what fits and what you're good at, because those who teach you know you and will know a whole world that you don't know yet, and I certainly don't know. So I have this whole go forward, go and find out what you want to do, because this is how God has given you these great gifts, and please just cultivate them. And so that's my greatest joy, is seeing her develop that. So yeah, I'm grateful for what my parents did for me, and I can pass it on to my daughter who's getting her higher education as well.
Growing up, did you guys grow up in church? How did that work? Because how do you even come about, like, you're going about your life and then you have an experience later in life that makes you decide to follow God?
Oh
Like,
God, yeah.
what does that look like?
Oh yeah. So no, we did not. I did not grow up in church. My family are not Christians, and so but we had a fantastic upbringing, very close little family. Um, and my spiritual awakening happened in my early 20s, when I was overseas in England, and I basically was open to the spiritual realm through spiritualist church, and the New Age, and that really grabbed my attention because I had no idea about this in general, and I got heavily, heavily involved with that for about 7 years, basically most of all of my 20s. And I even started hearing voices, and I became I guess a clairvoyant, and I had clients and I did readings, and yeah, really spiritually open. Um, I had a girlfriend, my best friend actually, decided that she would return to her Christian faith. I was surprised because I'd known her since we were teenagers, from a background with a faith. And as all good new faith believers, we like to share our stories. And I was very much not interested. And I was one of those, do not talk to me about God. Don't want to know him. Don't believe in him. Um, and there ensued 2 years of conversation. It was a very rocky 2 years, from 28 to 30, where the Lord basically started wooing me. And he would do things like he would do things totally out of the blue. Like I'd be in the bath and he'd come into like I have no concept of God, and yet he'd come into the bathroom and I'd felt this love just come up from my feet up into my mind, just right up my body. Just the bath, you're in your most vulnerable place, and I felt this utter love that was so warm and so deep that it just left me in tears, and I knew it was God, and I'm like, I'm in love with it and I'm frightened of it at the same time. And he would show me this little, introduce himself to me in these ways. And my girlfriend would mention Jesus, and I would get angry with her. And, um, but I started noticing her life changing, and I started feeling dissatisfied in my life. And I didn't know that I would be dissatisfied. Little did I know, my girlfriend told me a few years later, the Lord was increasing her faith by answering her prayers for me. So she was saying to the Lord, can you help Tania feel dissatisfied with what she's doing? Can you help her not hear the voices? The next day, I'd come over to her. Oh, I feel so dissatisfied with what I'm doing. I can't hear the voices anymore. And she said, oh, she said it blew her mind, you know. So she would keep saying that. And then it came to a point where I loved her so much. I couldn't walk away from our friendship. I wanted to so many times because the whole God conversation I did not want. She would talk to me. And I finally, over the 2 year period, I just lessened and lessened be afraid of it. I could never say the word God properly or Jesus. I felt this gore inside of me. And I didn't know about the spiritual warfare going on. I'd get nothing, and she'd hit the nail on the head all the time. And it came to a point where um, it warmed me to a point where I was kind of getting ready to say, okay. And she left this book on her counter one day, and it was about dating and Christianity. Now, I was a single woman. I'd been divorced I was divorced 22, 23, and now I'm 29. And I kind of assumed that by that age, I'd have another husband and a house. And here I am as a single parent. And this book interests me. And I said, can I read it? And she said, no. Like, what? It was like, I've got to read this. I have to read this book. And I begged her. And she finally, it's not my book. I can't give it to you. I'll have it I'll read it overnight. I'll get back to you in the morning. And she did that on purpose. And she finally let me take it home. And of course, by then I was going to treasure it with my life because it was so special and I had to get it back to her. And I read this book and I cried and cried and cried because it was the very first time that I'd read anything about why God gave us, like, God's creation in marriage and connections with between men and women. And I felt that I'd missed out because my parents didn't know. They were been together since they were 16 and 18. And here I am at 28, 29. I had no idea. And so I grieved. I totally grieved. But that must have just really pushed me over to that edge of, okay, I'm ready. And so I gave her the book back and she said, how'd you find it? I said, yeah, okay. If he wants to talk to me, he can come and talk to me. And I'm like looking at the ceiling of the house going, is he going to zap me with, like I had no concept of any, like I probably watched way many movies of God zapping people, like thou shall not, and so I'm like almost prepared to be zapped, and it didn't happen. But he came and talked to me that night in a dream. And would you like to hear about the dream?
I absolutely would.
All right. So anyway, in this dream, it was a very lucid dream that married the logical side of my mind and the emotional side of my being. So in this dream, I'm walking on a plane. It was kind of like an African safari type of place, right? Before me is a fence. It's not a very strong fence. It's kind of a wire fence with wooden poles. And on the other side of the fence was all this luscious green grass. There was a tree, shade, and there was a meandering brook, and it was just very peaceful, very lush, very beautiful. Then God appeared on the other side of the fence in the tree, under the tree. Now, I didn't know the difference, and I had no concept of Jesus Christ. So I looking at it now, I knew that who appeared to me was Jesus, but I went, oh, it's God. That was just, I didn't know anything. So God appeared, so Jesus appeared, and he said to me, now this is something that I learned obviously later on, that when Jesus appears, when you're spoken to by a heavenly being, the Holy Spirit uses his word to confirm who he is. And so I hadn't read the Bible before, but the very first thing he said to me was, I want to give you a life of abundance. And I thought, he allowed me to think, and I thought, oh, I could use a bit of abundance. and I listed off in my mind, I wouldn't mind a husband, and I wouldn't mind a house, and I wouldn't mind some money. Oh, my car's about to break down. I wouldn't mind a new car. And I always thought about the abundance of the material abundance of the world. And he just was patient with me, and just waited for me to think that process through. I went, oh, I could use some abundance, I said to him. And he goes, to have this abundance, you must choose to follow me. And I thought, do I have to be a Christian? And I was like, really, like, just like that. Do I have to be a Christian? And he's like, and I was really standing. And he showed me that where I was standing was basically the Serengeti. It was like no water had been in this place. The ground beneath my feet were cracked. It was brown. It was dead. Nothing was going to grow there. And that represented my life. The fence, obviously, was the proverbial choice that I was about to have to make. And then on the other side was my future. And I really understood it. And he allowed me to feel that through. And I thought, oh, that's kind of like a no-brainer. If this is my life and that's my life over there, I want you're going to be given. And so I said, okay, I want that. I will choose to be a Christian. And I said it out loud in my dream. And he said, good. And then I woke up and I thought, have I just become a Christian? It was so real. But that was my first real, how do you do, I'm Jesus kind of experience. And just me and him. And it took another 3 weeks for me to say it out loud and make it a public. I am classing myself as a Christian. And I remember I could feel the spiritual warfare around me because I didn't want to do it. And then I felt I should do it, and I didn't want to do it. And I was by myself in my lounge, and I'm pacing. And then I felt this hand. It was like this huge hand pressed me gently in the back of my small of my back. And I heard this voice that said, choose me. And I'm down on my knees and crying, throwing away, putting my tarot cards in the fire. And I'm like, just the whole, I've said, I'm yours. And that's how I became a Christian.
That's
Much
pretty
to
powerful.
the
That's the
chagrin
kind
of my
of
family.
experience most people just like hope or expect or wish for. That's
I
that's
guess,
pretty amazing.
yes, oh, praise God for it too. I mean, I did not want to know him. So he had to, it really interests me how people, how they, because when you're young, and you go through school, and if you meet Jesus, people going, oh, isn't it lovely, you've met Jesus as a little boy or a little girl. It's harder as you get older, because the very first thing that I had to deal with, the 30-year-old coming to Christ, was that I was spiritually open, and the whole ego shift. I had such an ego smack on the side of the head, because do I give myself up into this whole world I don't know about? Because I was kind of mature. I'm 30s mature, and I was mature spiritually and with my new agey stuff. And now you're asking me to be a baby in Christ, and I don't know anything. I didn't like that whole, I'm now a little baby and I don't know anything and I have to learn this whole Christian thing. It was very hard, as well as I had all this elation, like, wow, I've made the right decision. But then it was like slogging through the hard yards of, I have to choose. I have to actually be okay with literally giving up everything I thought I knew and choosing to believe another way. That was hard work. The Lord had a lot of mercy on me. So yeah, I thought, if we're going to do this, like, I was very serious. I thought, if we were going to do this, this has to be thorough, because I know myself enough to know that if I don't like it, I don't want to do it. And therefore, if you're going to irritate me in some way, if I'm going to meet a Christian who is less than, my expectation of what a Christian is, I'm going to don't want to be doing that sort of thing. But it's like, I need to know what the Bible says. I need to know how to be a Christian, and what am I supposed to read? What am I supposed to do? I gave up drinking because I just felt this whole aspect, like I celebrated. I had a friend said to me, oh, I became a Christian too. I said, let's celebrate. We had a whiskey. And then all my connection with God left me, and I thought, maybe drinking's not good. Like, I was just that process, because I lost my spiritual connection. So I gave up drinking, and I wasn't much of a drinker anyway, so it wasn't like I wasn't, big into it. So, but it was just part of that process. But yeah, it's a very cool story. But it was it was like the very first, these layers that he compounded, and he helped me through some pretty silly stuff. Even as a young Christian, I'd make some, like, did I just do that? I've never done that in my life. And I just made some choices that he had to, like, oh, here we go, and I had to pick you up and out of that. But he totally converted me. It wasn't just an emotional reaction to, or a good feeling. I think that's what I needed to come out of. The new age world is all about how everything feels. Like, if it feels good, go with it. And I thought, is that in the Christian world? And there's lots of principles and structure in the Christian world. And I've come out of feeling the new age stuff as being, I believed in everything. And therefore, because I believed in everything, I had no solid foundation. And I found really, I didn't realize how exhausted I was. And so when I started basically, what's the word when you consolidate? So as I'm consolidating my spirituality, it was like all into Jesus, and that really helped me move forward. And then my story just gets better and better, from that. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. I like how you said you, especially as an adult, because you have all this rationalization in your mind, and you have all this stuff built up over years and years of just living and experience and just dealing with people in general.
Mm.
And then you just had to let go of your own ego and almost just relearn, which
Yeah.
is fascinating. So, out of all the stuff you've had to give up, or all the stuff that's kind of just changed over the years in your life after finding this, what role did that play on creativity? Did you find yourself giving up more stuff or actually gaining more? What role did that play?
Um, Gaining more, but in a deeper way. So it was almost like stripping everything back and starting again. And so the first things that he taught me, other than listening to his voice, he built me up. So he affirmed me through other people, and he also helped me learn about myself, how I was created. I had some aptitude tests done on myself. I started being interested in my gifts and talents as well. And so he built me up from the ground to show me the practical stuff that he's given me. Then he started helping me see the creativity in the Bible, and there were pockets of people who created the temple, and how God would install in them the creativity to create gorgeous, creative things. And I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. And it was like basically potter. He'd been a potter. He's just building me up and forming me to the point where he allowed me, encouraged me to think that, it was my responsibility to really cultivate it. And I had the confidence to do it then. And so going into school, but there's so much more than that. He he placed it in my heart. I was born with it, and that's what I've come away with. I was born to be the very thing that I am now for the purpose that he has me to do. And I've really relaxed in that. It's not like, when you're like 14, 15, you go through career advice at school and you're like, I don't know what to do when I grow up. And like, I'm thinking, we need to look at theen these kiddies when they're tiny, because they have, I remember my daughter jamming to beats when she was 6 months old and being really into music, and it's like, wow, um, my parents gave me my old primary school report cards when I was like 5 and 6 at school, and they'd say Tanya is she's chatty and really good little artist, and that was right through. I was always chatty and always a good little artist. And so these are the like little signs that you see in your family and your children as they grow up. And so yeah, so he built me up. And then yeah, and also he would remind me that the more I use, the more he'll give me. So it wasn't just again, I'm always limited in my thinking, narrow-minded in my thinking, and it's like, oh yes, I'm a graphic designer. A few months into working for myself, someone, okay, I'm a graphic designer, always have been, always wanted to be. I thought I'd also be a photographer until I went to art school and I found myself in the bathroom crying my eyes out because I can't figure out apertures and it really hurts. And my German teacher going, oh, I've been very good at this all my life. I don't know what you've got the problem about. And I thought, oh, one tutor stood up at the very beginning of school and said, you're all here to basically get a career and to make money. He said, sometimes it's really, really good to choose a course just for the sake of enjoyment. And although I went, hey, that's a great idea, I think I'll take illustration as a lark. It was like, oh, yes, I'm going to pay a few $1,000s more, and I'm going to add another, 60 hours to my time. Like I basically did 80 hours a week in artwork. But I did it because I thought I might enjoy it. I didn't know I could draw at all. I didn't know. And I end up dropping out of, or finishing up. I just dropping out. I end up leaving the photography class because I thought there's too many wonderful photographers out there. It's obviously not my. I can take a photograph, but I just wasn't enjoying it. And I took up illustration, and I thoroughly loved it. I was totally scared of it. I'd literally spend 6 hours and not touch my paper because I was so frightened of making a mess of it. And yet I was an A student. When I finally got into the swing of it, I was an A student, and I come out as an illustrator and on the other side, and I was thinking, Lord, as much as I love graphic design, and graphic design for me, because it's something I've done forever and ever, amen, it's like breathing. It's automatic. You will always get something beautifully designed if you come to me, right? And so it's like tying your shoelaces, it's breathing, and I said to the Lord one day on a whim, I said, oh, I wouldn't mind doing a little bit more illustration. Wouldn't it be fun? Can you bring me a client? Like absentmindedly, could you bring me a client who wants illustration? And then someone said, oh, could we have an illustration? And then one led to another, led to another, led to another. And I thought, this is what I want to do because I was able to be something else. And then I didn't even know what it was going to be. I didn't know it was going to lend into what I'm doing now as well.
That's amazing. I'm curious, taking a step back before you came and you had your experience with God and found God, especially in creativity. What was designing and everything like for you before that, contrasted to what it was like after?
Before that, the jobs I had before having the purpose to it, um, I was made to be a creative. It was a drive in me. So I would always be asked to do the creative things through either church or through in jobs. And I kind of knew what I was doing to a certain extent, but it became a little bit boring, the same old, same old. Um, and I felt drawn to bigger things, but I didn't know how to get them. I guess that's why I think back in 1999, 2000, I did study a little. I studied for a year because the computer world was now in the creative world. So going in and studying and learning about the computer age with creativity really assisted me in getting work. That's for sure. But it was all very, can you create this flyer? Can you do these business cards? And I had work that was very, print shop. Like I'd work at the local print shop, or I'd work in the marketing department for a tire factory, and so it was kind of that. And that was fun at the beginning, and then I thought, man, I really want to do more rather than just be the graphic designer. But I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that looked like. Um, I remember when I was 12. I remember the entrepreneurial spirit really had taken me then. Um, but so I would create like liquid embroidery. I'd make liquid embroidery flowers and put them on, make doilies and sell them to my grandma and all her friends. And I'd get these orders every month, and I'd just My friends were going on paper routes and milk bottle runs, and I'd be making, good money, but I didn't know how to take it. Like I was 12, I had no idea. My parents didn't know. They were like, "Oh, that's lovely," but didn't know how to move me through okay, this is now a business, and this is how you used to, So yeah, so I felt that therefore in my 20s, I was thinking, oh, how could I do more? I had a desire to want to work in an advertising agency. That was what I was really, really hoping for. But as I became a Christian, I felt that wouldn't suit um, my new faith and my new, what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to try and make something really good just so you could buy it. Like beer or smokes or photoshopping a woman so incredibly beautiful that like when I realized the world of what that was about, I thought, oh no, that's not what I want to do. And so yeah, it all moved me to what I end up doing.
Okay.
Mm.
So then looking back, if you could go back to your like mid to late 20s self and kind of, besides give yourself advice, but even just translate the experience of what you've had in a way that they would understand, how would you go about doing that?
Oh boy, she'd be a bit fun to talk to. my old my old self. How would I'd probably start talking to her about. um, I need to affirm her. She doesn't have a lot of confidence in who she is at that age or her abilities. She has dreams that are not being met, and she doesn't know what's about to happen to her. Um, and if I told her what I was doing, it would probably put a fire in her belly because it was there a long time ago and she'd made some choices that pulled it away from her. Um, but to show her what her life would be like, it'd probably happen. I think knowing her, it probably happened about 5 or 6 years earlier than what happened for me. She'd be like, really? I want that. Like to show her would have been very exciting. She would have just probably cried and thought, could I? Because I think she was thinking. I can remember myself thinking at that. 28, single parenting. It was like life wasn't working out, and I I'd always felt that I started behind the eight ball. It was like it's, um didn't think much of myself or my life or what my abilities because I was just like a mum and that was hard. Yeah. Not that I was given such a blessing of a child. She was so no hard work at all. But I think I felt I was in a cage and also about to go through this huge spiritual development and change, and it took a bit of energy to walk through. Yeah,
So I know we're running out of time. I just have like two more things I want to touch on
sure.
before we have to wrap up. But I know you like you just mentioned like your old self, especially as like a single young mom, just felt like in a cage. What exactly was that cage, and how, looking back, how did you find yourself climbing into it?
Oh, how did I climb into it? I think it was all the expectations I had of life. I expected certain things to be in place by that age. Um, how I climbed into it, goodness, I was a I made a couple of wrong choices when I was in my late teens, which caused a bit of grief in my family, and it caused me to basically leave home and then start traveling the world and losing my goals. And I thought I'd really ruined my life, and so I become a bit of a wild child. I become this young woman that had um, no boundaries. obsessive behaviors, um, and I just lived in the moment, and which caused other situations to happen, and consequently, I was in a very, very short marriage, and of course, I had my daughter. So I felt that I went from being a really wild child to all of a sudden being married, a mother, and literally I had a white picket fence around a little home. And as much as I loved the idea, it was very difficult in case I had the breakdown of my relationship, and so therefore it was like that was my cage. I was now in the boundary of being a mum and having to be responsible, having to, so my daughter was basically my saving grace because I was probably not going into good places. So, and I love my baby girl. Oh my goodness. I'm so grateful to the Lord who allowed me. In fact, I think that was the first time I really felt that he spoke to me. I remember being told, and I was in England at the time, and I was in total denial that I might be pregnant. But I got to the point where I needed to go get checked out. And the doctor said all of this in one sentence. Yes, Tania, you're pregnant. Would you like an abortion? And my heart just went, like, one, I'm as pregnant. Two, you're going to take it from me. And I remember backing up against the wall and here I am, I think I was like 21. And this calm, masculine voice came inside my head. Now, I had never experienced this before to that point. And I heard this voice that said, you're old enough to play the game. You're old enough to take the responsibility. You're not 16. I'm 21 or 20, 21. And it's like, it gave me okay. I said, no, thank you. Thank you that I'm pregnant. And no, I won't have an abortion. And it was just that moment of strength that just came over me. And, yeah, so that was so I stayed in that, but I felt it took all my 20s to I guess not resent it, and I hate saying that, but because I have a very, very beautiful and I love being a mum. Had I not had that experience, I never had a child again. Like, I only ever had the one, and it was my only time that I was ever going to have a child. So it just never happened again. So that was like, it feels like it's a totally different person to who I am now and who I became. And I almost feel resistant in even saying any of that because I don't want it to reflect on my daughter. But I guess it was just how I was so young. My daughter now is 26 and has broken the cycle, and has never married and has been busy with life and loves Jesus. It's like, oh my goodness, Lord, you've blessed me with this beautiful girl. Yeah, but these are the when you don't follow the Lord, or even if you do follow the Lord, you can make up some pretty messy situations. But He is so loving to get us through it. He's so loving.
I think it's really powerful how you touched on. Thank you for sharing that.
You're
Um,
welcome.
I think it's powerful too how you touched on, like, you are. It is like looking back at a completely different person, which I would hope a lot of us, especially as we grow older, 30s, 40s, 50, like as we get older, I hope we can look back at our younger selves and almost kind of shake our heads in a way. And it is kind of like
Oh,
looking like an alternate version of ourselves, right? I would hope,
totally.
because there are those people you
Yeah,
find that are kind of like an Arrested Development situation where you're like, oh man, like, woof, like, this is
yeah,
almost like being right back in high school. Like, I don't want to be
yeah.
here anymore, you know?
Yeah, yeah. When I was in art school, of course, all my peers were 18 to 21, and I was 38 to 40. Over the like 3 years, and they'd invite me to all their parties, and I would go at appropriate times and then leave before everyone got drunk, and I loved them so much, and I'd be going to a party, pulling the boys and girls off each other, and thinking, oh, this was me back then. you know, and and now they're all in their 30s and getting married and having babies themselves, and but it's like so funny to see yourself change and mature. And I tell you what though, I mean, like I'm 49 in a few weeks, and I have loved my 40s so much. And it's like every decade gets better, and I become a much better person by the grace of God, and and with more purpose too. I mean, now I have so much more an inkling to know what he's doing, and yet I still have this part of me like, oh, what are you doing next? Where are we going? Because what we haven't talked about is where he's got me in my creativity. He basically said that I can travel the world. So I'm a full-time nomadic creative, that goes around the world and donates my business services to his people in business and ministry, and that's why you see me in this. I'm in a bus at the moment because I'm visiting my parents, but I'm a full-time house sitter. So it's like this is a world that I would never have been able to create for myself. This is what God has done, and it suits who I am. And He said that He gave me the desire to want to do the very things that I love doing. So I was like, cool, let's bring it on.
That's awesome. One of the things I want to touch on too before we wrap is because you had said in like the first kind of like Jesus introducing himself to you with a dream, when you were thinking about all the things in your mind that was, abundance, and the cars and everything, which there's nothing wrong with that
No,
stuff. But looking back at that dream and what you were thinking of versus where you're at now, you get to travel the world, you get to work with some amazing people.
yeah.
What mind shift have you had looking at that dream, thinking, "Oh, this is the abundance that I want," versus now of what the abundance actually is for your life and where it's going?
I remember thinking about that a number of years ago, thinking, "Oh, did we reach that abundance, Lord?" Yeah, the abundance, the list that I had of the husband and the house and the money and the car, blah blah. Well, I have a nice car now, but it's still, I keep it within $3,000. No, it's totally different. I realized that as I got to know the Lord, abundance and His abundance is totally different than the material abundance that, yes, He gives material abundance, and
Mm-hmm.
but I think because I had so many years as a single parent, having to um, learn to live within my means, learning to be content with having little, and then having me literally sell everything to live out of a couple of bags for 8 years. Um, he's taught me that abundance is so much deeper. So basically what he told me in the dream has come to pass. I have a life of abundance. Um, and I'm always taken care of. I have everything I need. I don't want for much, um, which is all by he's changed me. I'm a completely different. I don't even have I wouldn't say a materialistic bone in my body. I've just bought a new phone because I'm tech crazy. My mum had one and I had to have one. And so I really love that sort of thing. But I bought it, cash. Like I'm not put in a hock or anything like that. But it was more of a case of the Lord really changed the depth and meaning behind the very thing. So it's like abundance for me now feels like I really want to be in the center of His will, because with what I do in my business and where I am in my life. Because wherever I'm at that place with Him, then I have ultimate abundance. Like I'm the depth. It's a depth. It's definitely a depth. It's spiritual. It's practical. And I'm learning. Like I've not arrived. I'm like, if I had a house to look after, then I'd have all the more money to deal with it, but I don't, so I haven't. And yet he's still teaching me how to, okay, your business is important to me as well, and let's grow that. It's, oh, okay, let's grow the business, and what do you want me to do with my money? So it's totally, before it was all about me, and now it's like, okay, how do you want me to deal with my money? And yeah.
So as we wrap up, are there any last kind of like thoughts, tools, or tips you kind of just like to leave the audience, especially if like you in your late 20s, your early 30s, or even like I don't know, even 5 years ago, is there something that you wish someone would impart on you to just kind of help your journey?
I had a lot of questions about business. What really has helped me and what I like to share of myself now when I speak with people who are in the throes of, oh, I'd like to work for myself, or I'd like to have my business as a ministry, and how do I do that? To really be transparent with your story, to be transparent with your numbers, be transparent, tell people. Like, you don't have to tell them in big groups, but just if people want to know. Like when I'm in America, in New Zealand, there are Christians in business, but we are dispersed within the secular community. And so when I belong to a couple of networking groups, and the majority was on, like, if there's a table of 18 people, there's me who's a Christian and perhaps one other person, and that's kind of very common. So I'm constantly having coffees and lunches with these secular people, and they want to know my story, and I can't help but tell about this is, look, God has made, brought me this way, and they are all fascinated by it, and um, like really really heartfully taken by it. And I realize that I'm doing the very thing that God wants me to do. And He's told me, you've lived this lifestyle long enough. It's time for you to share it. And I'm expecting I'm going to be on a stage and talking to 1,000 people, or in at least a church. And it's like, I think it's because I'm talking to all these pockets of individuals. And it's all non-assuming. I'm not there to convert them. I'm only sharing how I've been led in my business, because it's practical, and they're like, wow, that's great. And I create great product and great service, and so it's like they value me, they get to know me. I'm not trying to convert them, and it's just happening like weekly. I'm amazed at how often I'm asked to share. So tell me about everything. Like, how do you mean that God did this for you? And because when you're on a one-on-one, it's almost like the walls come tumbling down. It's just not. If I talk about God and my personal experience, it's not pushing it on you, because it's about me and how I've been led. And I'm really interested. And because look, my first husband, my ex-husband, he's Muslim. So it's like I have a real love of other cultures and other faiths, and I get it, and also one group I belong to, everybody's really kind of new agey, and I speak the language, and it doesn't phase me, because I know where I'm at and I know where they're at, and I can speak as they do. So yeah, share who you are, and be really open with it, and in a way that really serves them, not just don't air your dirty laundry, but unless they have an issue and you have to air. Oh yeah, yeah, your dirty laundry can serve someone else too at the right
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, just feel out the situation and come with
Totally.
authenticity.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's perfect. Perfect word. Authenticity. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Tanya, for taking the time with us, for
Yeah.
sharing with us, and just kind of being open. Um, for the viewers, if you guys really like this, where can they reach out to you, kind of see your work, follow what you're doing?
Yes. Yeah, well, you can find me at drawfulofgiants.com. And you can find me at Facebook at drawfulofgiants. You can find me, you can Google me, and I'm all over Google like a rash. And you can also find me at Your Friendly House Sitter on Facebook as well. So yeah, I'm everywhere, man. Oh, and on Instagram, and yeah, so yeah,
Perfect.
I'm more Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. I'll put all the links in the description below, and yeah, if you feel led, look at her work, hire her, reach out to her, say hi.
Yeah,
Tanya, thank you so
yeah.
much, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll catch you next time.